Thank you.
Interpreters, you can go ahead, please.
Hello, welcome to this webinar. Kindly note that there will be interpretation services available for this webinar. To access the interpretation services, can look to your screen, your right side down, you see the interpretation icon. It will pop up in a few minutes. Once it pops up, you can click on it and select the language of your choice. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour, soyez les bienvenus à ce webinaire. Veuillez noter qu'il y aura les services d'interprétation disponibles. Pour accéder aux services d'interprétation, veuillez regarder à droite en bas de l'écran, vous verrez l'icône d'interprétation qui va s'afficher dans quelques instants. Une fois que c'est affiché, vous pouvez cliquer sur cela et sélectionner la langue de votre choix. Merci.
Thank you so much to our interpreters, and hello and jumbo everyone from Nairobi. My name is Mark Mulobi. I'm a board member at AfrEA and also at Agden. And today I'll be the moderator for the day. And we are having a very good panel discussions here. So I first want to welcome you all. Tell us where you are joining from and your organization. And please use the chat function and the Q&A now that this is a webinar. And for those who would want to pose questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we will give you the floor. And to our exciting panel discussants here, I want to first just introduce all of them and then we'll dive to the discussions. First, I want to introduce Dr. Candice Moko, a good friend, a champion for young and emerging evaluators in Africa and the world. It is she's a transformative leader in monitoring evaluation, and she has over 25 years of experience in shaping evidence-based decision making in Africa. She has served as the director of Clear AA Anglophone, and currently she heads the program for APDET, where actually she trained me. She has empowered countless practitioners through training and mentorship, particularly young and emerging evaluators. She is a legacy board member for AfrEA, and she champions Africa's centric approach to evaluation, ensuring that it reflects continents' unique contexts and cultures. Our scholarly work includes publications on responsible data governance. Further, this is cementing to her as a thought leader. And today, she will share with us vision for the youth, for the evaluation in Africa. And she'll be doing this by reflecting on the role of the YEEs in shaping Africa's evaluation future. Then we have another panel discussant from Rwanda, Rubibi Aimi, and she is a young and emerging evaluator, and she is very passionate and impact-driven all the way from Rwanda, and she is specializing in monitoring and evaluation with a strong foundation on public administration and local governance. Our work focuses on advancing digital inclusion and promoting evidence-based decision-making in African development. She brings a unique perspective that bridges data analytics, policy insights, and community engagement, aiming to ensure development efforts are equitable, inclusive, and sustainable. Rubibi is currently pursuing theology, deepening a holistic approach to development by integrating faith, governance, entrepreneurship, and she is committed to foster meaningful change that at the intersections of data, dignity, and purpose. And today, she'll be sharing with us her personal experience on how AfrEA has impacted her career as a young and emerging evaluators. And last but not least, my friend from Togo, Mawina, who is a climate change adaptation specialist working with FAO at Togo. And he is the treasurer for the Tongolese Evaluation Network. He has a degree in rural socio-economic and monitoring and evaluation of development programs. And Mawina specializes in evaluating emerging public policies and developing climate resilient programs for farming communities. His work focuses on supporting vulnerable population, youth empowerment projects, food security initiatives across Africa. He collaborates with national and international partners to assess programs' impact and develop evidence-based solutions for eradicating hunger and poverty. His mission really centers around creating effective evaluation strategies for sustainable development programs. With that particular expertise in climate adaptation and rural development in Togo and broader Africa. And today, he'll talk to us about challenges and aspirations of young and emerging evaluators in Africa. And so that I break the monotony and I pass the floor to Dr. Candice to share her reflections. Welcome, Doc.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you for those wonderful words. I'm very humbled by your introduction. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the participants for joining us. I know you had many, many choices of where to go this global week. So I'm quite inspired and quite humbled that you came here for this conversation. I must say that it's consistent, though, in every conference. The feedback that I've received from colleagues, even from conferences I didn't attend, that the sessions for young and emerging evaluators are always oversubscribed. And that should tell us something. Even today, having so many young and emerging evaluators or those interested in the subject matter does mean that this rising demand demonstrates something for us, particularly on the African continent. So I'll obviously talk a bit about that, but I want to set it up by first of all just problematizing what we're dealing with. What is the context that we're stepping into as evaluators, whether young and emerging or in the business or the industry for a very long time. So I know a lot of people have already said that we are in a time of unprecedented crisis, and it almost seems like, a recitation that we're saying, but it is absolutely true. What is termed the poly crisis, where there are many intersecting and interrelated crises, with the climate crisis, of course, being the most significant existential crisis of our time for humanity. In particular, for Africa, we still grapple with our protracted problems layered amongst that as well. Rampant levels of poverty and inequality, food insecurity, and exacerbating levels of hunger. It's in fact mind blowing when one reads the data that's coming out on food insecurity and hunger on the African continent. Of course, conflicts and exacerbating levels of debt. I was listening to some of the talks from the recent World Bank meetings, spring meetings, and I think one of the or some of the feedback from the African Development Bank, for example, was on this exceptionally high levels of debt in African states. At the same time, evidence is being contested, and I'm sure all of you are aware of the fact that, what we thought we knew for sure about institutions with long histories of producing great evidence on what works, being closed down, programs being shut down. and ignoring decades of research and evidence on what works, and those institutions just completely folding in and shutting down. So trust levels, I think, even for evidence producers is very low. Of course, with AI, with alternative facts and modes and levels and ways of producing evidence, and decision makers being able to access many different ways of finding out what is the best policy option, and not necessarily getting that from evaluation, has put evidence also, and evaluation in particular, in its own moment of crisis. I know there's a lot of talk about transformation and how evaluation needs to transform. And I think this is how I want to sort of move away from the problem. I think we're all very familiar that there is this big problem. So to switch and reframe it to say, what does this say to us as well? It's not only a moment of extreme problems, but a moment of extreme opportunities as well. I think what we do is we romanticize the old architecture, and we bemoan the fact that the international finance architecture is changing, it's crumbling. Donors are changing their frameworks and their models of financing international development cooperation, and we're all panicked about it. Yet those are the same frameworks that we've been bemoaning and criticizing for decades. Yet those are changing right now. Yes, maybe not always for our benefit, but certainly there's a moment where there is a shift and a pivot. So what does that tell us? There's a moment, an open space for saying that what was problematic about the old international development cooperating financed architecture, and what needs to change. And I'm going to come to the point of what this means for young and emerging evaluators linked to this moment of opportunity. But I just wanted to remind ourselves to not romanticize what we're leaving behind and what's crumbling. What's crumbling was actually problematic. So it's an opportunity for us to rethink, very importantly, the sovereignty of African states in relation to their own development goals. I think what we see happening, for example, in Francophone African states is phenomenal. The pushback and the push for sovereignty, I think, is something for the whole continent to admire, and to take stock of, and to say, what does this say then for the rest of the continent as well? Yes, we have many problems across the continent in different regions, and they are also contextually relevant, depending on which region you're talking about. But I do think that there is also a greater reconsideration of Pan-Africanism, and how do we operate as a continent, fully aware of our resources, our minerals, our wealth, and not only the wealth under the ground, but our human resource wealth as well. And I want to talk to that particularly for young and emerging evaluators, because there's often the notion of the deficit of the African evaluator, which I want to challenge. In the spaces that I sit now, when you grow up, I was also a young and emerging evaluator once, would you believe? I was 28 when I started in evaluation. And I'll tell you a bit about that as well, and how to encourage you as well as you enter into the space, or in middle, or wherever you are in the space. But in the spaces that I've been allowed to sit now, at these lofty tables, and you hear, talk, you often are surprised at the fact that there's a deficit view of African capacities. And I challenge that as far as I can in the opportunities I get, because when we go to AfrEA conferences, for example, we have 700, 1,000 Africans who are exceptionally talented. And some of you here might be part of the AfrEA listserv, not listserv necessarily, but the WhatsApp groups, where I see phenomenal expertise and the sharing of phenomenal expertise amongst professionals. So the African deficit of human resources, and especially in the field of evaluation, is a falsehood. Yes, there are deficits in certain areas, but not dramatically more than there are in other parts of the world. The capacities for young and emerging evaluators to be part of the evaluation supply and demand market, there are unnecessary barriers to that. And I'll talk a bit about that as well. So I think that the sovereignty of African states, as my point really, in relation to development goals, also speaks to us about the sovereignty of of African states in terms of the evidence economy. And when I talk about the evidence economy, I talk about the demand for evaluative evidence as well as the supply. Those who are producing the evidence, supplying the evidence, as well as those who are decision makers, particularly in governments, who are needing and requiring and demanding that evidence. And how do we strengthen that evidence economy? At the moment, the economy is skewed towards international development cooperation, where external agencies are the ones who are demanding evaluations. So young and emerging evaluators are drawn into that evidence economy in a way of, in the sense that they have to develop the skills in order to enter that value chain, in order to produce the evidence that international development actors require for their own accountability requirements. It's not wrong, but it's skewed. I think what we really need to talk about is how do young and emerging evaluators become advocates and actors in the space to strengthen country-owned, local, national evaluation systems as well. How can young and emerging evaluators help to build the field, help to build the market, help to build the supply and demand? I think that it starts with the commitment to the positionality around that. I know the pressures that there are entering into the field to say that one has only arrived if one has gotten into the international development value chain. Once you're working for the big international development agencies, that's when you have arrived. I think there needs to be a different mindset and different thinking around that, that the capacities that are required locally to build a local demand and supply is as legitimate as being in the space of international development cooperation as well. So building those capacities to support local and national evaluation systems, and it's understanding the importance of country ownership and the commitment to that position, I think is very important for the new role of young and emerging evaluators. I know it's a different way of thinking, it's a shifting of the position, because it's also, I think, to speak very frankly, amongst friends and family, to say that it's also a bread and butter issue. Of course, being a young and emerging evaluator, you do want to get a secure job. You do want to ensure that you change the trajectory of your own professional development. There's also personal ambitions. It's not saying that those must be squashed, but I think that in building the African development community and building the local evaluation community will also ensure that there's a vibrant supply, not only locally, but also to the international development community as well. There is a very high demand. A lot of the requests we get, even as IPDET and even before in my previous role at the CLEAR Center, would be, do you have a list of evaluators for country X, country Y, and it's for young and emerging evaluators very often. And I think that the demand is really, really high. So the need to develop those local capacities, obviously, with that shift in mindset to say that the capacities locally are just as legitimate as the external capacities, is something that we need to have, I think, a positional shift. Another role, I think, or maybe I should say a mindset, is that being entrepreneurial is a must in this environment. I think expecting to be capacitated and then, being appointed or getting into a position is something, especially in the current constrained funding environment, very, very difficult. I know a young person just completed their PhD talking about evalpreneurs, and it was at the last AfrEA conference that he actually presented on a panel I moderated about, what he's found about becoming an evalpreneur. I'm sure one can find that dissertation somewhere online. But I think the points he was making was very true, that, an entrepreneurial sort of positionality or spirit needs to be part of young and emerging evaluators toolkit, to start to look at combining skills of other young people in your space, in your networks, to say, how do we begin to produce or be actors in the market as well? Whether it is you're talking about establishing consulting practices, or freelancing and showing up in spaces where your skills can be practiced. Because a lot of the barriers are, for example, we need a young and emerging evaluator, but they need 10 years experience. So that's one of the big obstacles. And so I think having an entrepreneurial sort of edge to your progression in this field, I think is very, very important. So the learning and the upskilling is definitely a must. It's a part of that as well. Contemporary problems and crises need contemporary solutions. I need not say to this crew that AI, of course, is important. Futures thinking, I think, is the new kid on the block. We need to start not looking at evaluation as often we do as an ex post, reflective moment, but to say how do we, influence future programming, and futures thinking is a definite part of that. And then obviously in the climate space, and as my fellow panelist Mawena is also a climate specialist. I think those are the kinds of areas where, in that vein of entrepreneurial thinking, young and emerging evaluators have to start thinking about where are the areas where there's high demand. And my last point, I think, in this regard is that young and emerging evaluators are really, really important, play an important role in challenging the status quo. I think there's a lot wrong with the current system, and I think leadership need to be shown a different way. The transformations we're trying to bring across, I think sometimes we are stuck in old systems and old ways of thinking. I think that the energy and the thinking and the innovations that young and emerging evaluators bring, it's very important, but they need to have the courage to step up and to voice the concerns. Sometimes when you come into a space where the systems seem to be ironclad and this is just how things are done, one feels sort of a lack of courage to speak up, because surely, if it's always been done that way, then it must be perfect. And I'm saying no. I think that there needs to be some speaking up on what's going wrong with the system. And I think that's a very, very important role for young and emerging evaluators as well. I have obviously a lot more to say, Mr. Moderator, as you know me very well, but I will stop there to allow others. And obviously there's a question and answer session as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doc. I like how you started us from a crisis point. You transitioned us to a point of opportunities, and you debunked a few things. And I like how you highlighted the young and emerging evaluators as advocates. And I also liked the entrepreneurial bit. I just want to confirm to you, us as AfrEA, we had your candidate when he was presenting, and we'll be launching something in Addis Ababa. We are working to have a program where we will train 400 young and emerging evaluators across the continent, and 70% will be women. I'm speaking like that because I wrote the proposal. So, and that is in the pipeline. And I know, Mr. President, will be launching that. And I've seen Dr. Ponge here, another champion for young and emerging evaluators, Jessica Bisgard. I'm really, really, really excited to see. I'll hold the questions to the end. So I'll bring on board Emi Rubibi, please, to share with us your experience with us, AfrEA.
Thanks a lot. Greetings to everyone. My name is Rubibi Eme from Rwanda. So I'm going to share to you my personal experience on how AfrEA impacted my life, my career as a young emerging evaluators. So it was last year in July 2024, I was introduced to the African Evaluation Association, AfrEA, thanks to the kind and support from La Alameo legal representative who connected me with the AfrEA leadership team. That moment was the beginning of my journey, life changing in monitoring and evaluation. So in other words, thanks a lot, Alameo. Through AfrEA, I had the privilege to attend the Emerging Evaluators Camp in Cotonou, Benin, last year in November. AfrEA left no stone in supporting my experience as the Emerging Evaluators there. Everything I needed without exception was full taken care of. Thank you, AfrEA. During that conference or that camp, the experience I gained from there was more than just technical skills or technical knowledge. It opened my mind. It developed me my confidence and helped me with building connections with different people's professionals, peers, and so many. I learned that evaluation is not just about data, reports, no. It's about people, communities, and change. Thank you, AfrEA. Sir was especially inspired by African-rooted evaluation practices like the Made in Africa evaluation approach. It helped me understand that evaluation should speak our languages, our local languages, reflect our cultures, respond to local needs. For example, here in Rwanda, we have what we call it imihigo. Imihigo, it's our performance contract, which are powerful tools for accountability and improvement. These are the kind of context based on solution we must continue to inspire. Thank you. Through networking with the experience I gained from the AfrEA with both young and professionals, senior professionals, through AfrEA has opened doors I never imagined that I have found mentors, role models, friends who guide and support. My confidence has grown from staying up silent in workshops, now standing up and sharing that can shape my future or our future as a young emerging evaluators. Thank you so much, AfrEA. AfrEA's webinars like one we are attending today or now have deep my understanding and commitment to ethical, inclusive, and context-aware evaluation. They have reminded me that as a young evaluator, I'm not alone. I'm a part of a bigger story written by Africans for Africa. Thank you so much, AfrEA. I sincerely thank African Evaluation Association, AfrEA, and Rwanda Monitoring Evaluation for believing in young voices. And mostly, my deepest thanks to my homeland for promoting or empowering women like me. Thanks a lot to my country, Sir, and I also thank every hand, every heart from Rwanda, Kigali to Accra, Ghana, from across East Africa, Africa continent, and the whole world at large that has supported my journey. God bless you. God bless you for me. So hope to see you soon next week, but one in Addis Ababa, and happy 25th anniversary to AfrEA in advance. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you so much, Rubibi. Thank you so much. I've picked a couple of points here that the young and emerging evaluators are part of a bigger story written by the Africans. So fabulous, fabulous. She has talked about localizing evaluation, and she mentioned a very critical point that evaluation is about people. And I'm so happy for the confidence. We are used to going to conferences and seeing the usual faces. Today, actually, this is the first time she's speaking in a conference. So really, really, and she has done fabulous. So much. Thank you so much, Rubibi. And our last speaker, as I will be now skimming through to see what questions have been posted, Mawina, and he'll be speaking in French, so you can select the language that you like. Thank you so much. Mawina, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Mac. Bonjour à tous. Je suis Kosiga Mawina Noumovi. Je suis togolais, je suis au Togo. Alors, je voudrais apporter ma contribution. Je vais parler sur les défis et aspirations des jeunes évaluateurs en Afrique. Euh, D'abord, on va commencer ce que c'est qu'un jeune évaluateur. Un jeune évaluateur, c'est un jeune professionnel de l'évaluation qui soit vient de finir, d'avoir son diplôme en évaluation ou dans une discipline connaissent comme l'économie, l'agroéconomie, c'est très souvent, et d'autres spécialités connaissent. Un jeune évaluateur, c'est le jeune qui a des aspirations pour être spécialiste en évaluation et rentrer dans la chaîne d'évaluation des politiques publiques de développement. Alors, ces jeunes sont souvent confrontés à des défis, des principaux défis rencontrés que je vais énumérer quelques-uns. Un accès limité aux opportunités de formation et de mentorat. Tout à l'heure, la première intervention a parlé de l'entrepreneuriat, qui est un aspect très, très, très important. Mais avant d'avoir ce background pour entreprendre, les jeunes évaluateurs ont besoin d'opportunités de formation et de mentorat, d'où la nécessité de s'approcher dans les divers pays, dans les réseaux d'associations de l'évaluation qui sont dans les différents pays. Le jeune évaluateur également est confronté à des difficultés d'intégrer les réseaux professionnels d'évaluation dont je viens de parler. Pour cela, je dirais qu'il faut une veille stratégique de chaque jeune qui va leur permettre de trouver le, le réseau évaluateur de chaque pays, de leur pays. Moi, principalement, mon cas, c'est le réseau togolais de l'évaluation qui m'a permis de connaître aujourd'hui le réseau AfrEA et qui m'a aussi permis de suivre diverses formations. Comme vient de le dire Madame Rubibi, on était ensemble au Bénin à la formation, au camp des formateurs, au camp des jeunes évaluateurs. Le jeune évaluateur est également confronté au manque de reconnaissance et de visibilité de ce domaine, ce qui est normal parce que tant qu'il n'a pas eu l'opportunité de faire ses preuves, de faire ses expériences, il aura des difficultés à être connu sur le marché. D'où toujours, j'insiste, sur le réseau des évaluateurs nationaux ou peut-être africains, auxquels les jeunes, qui donnent plein d'opportunités aux jeunes, comme ce que fait AfrEA, comme la conférence de l'AfrEA que nous sommes en train de faire. Alors, les aspirations et motivations d'un jeune évaluateur. Un jeune évaluateur a pour aspiration de contribuer activement au développement durable de l'Afrique. Développer les compétences solides en évaluation, être un agent de changement et l'innovation dans leur communauté. Je vais parler de mon cas. Par exemple, j'ai eu l'opportunité aujourd'hui de travailler à la FAO grâce évidemment au réseau que j'ai eu autour de moi. Et aujourd'hui, je contribue efficacement à mettre en place des programmes et des évaluations qui permettent, qui rentrent directement, qui bénéficient directement aux populations internes, ce que j'ai toujours voulu, ce que j'ai toujours fait. Et donc, ma place aujourd'hui me permet d'évaluer les différents programmes et projets qui vont directement au niveau des bénéficiaires et voir si les bénéficiaires qui doivent nécessairement, qui doivent véritablement bénéficier de ce programme-là sont évidemment les bénéficiaires où le programme vient. Est-ce que le programme vient exactement remplir un besoin? Est-ce que ce besoin-là existait? Évidemment, je vous assure que c'est une expérience qu'il faut vivre et dont je suis très content. Donc, je dirais, je recommanderais aux jeunes de s'approcher du réseau des jeunes évaluateurs. Alors, je dirais également que le jeune évaluateur doit renforcer le programme de mentorat. Le jeune évaluateur doit créer une plateforme d'échange et de collaboration. Ça, ce sont des activités que les réseaux comme l'AfrEA et les réseaux nationaux donnent comme opportunité aux jeunes. Donc, aujourd'hui, par exemple, avec l'opportunité de l'AfrEA, l'opportunité que l'AfrEA nous a offert pour le cadre de formation, pour les différents webinaires, où aujourd'hui aussi je prends la parole en public, c'est ma première fois également, comme Madame Rubibi. Donc, ces trucs-là nous permettent de, ces différentes formations nous permettent de changer de mentalité, nous permettent de prendre notre cap et de foncer vers nos objectifs de vie, nos objectifs professionnels. Voilà. Je crois que je vais m'arrêter ici et donner la parole aux différents débats. Merci.
Thank you so much, Mawina. And he talked a bit about some of the challenges. Um, and he started by defining a young and emerging evaluators. I happened to have been leading Evaluate. I just handed over last year, or rather earlier in the year. And we had defined as a young and emerging evaluator is anyone 35 years and below. If you have 5 years of experience, 5 years and below in experience in evaluation, you are considered as an emerging evaluator. Or if you are interested, you've just finished school and you've not even done evaluation, and you're interested in evaluation, you're also considered as part of that team. And he talked about limited access to opportunities, training. And here I would just, because I'm seeing my colleagues from Samia, and I know the Emerging Evaluators Network, they usually have a session, a monthly session, where they bring on board uh, seasoned evaluators to come and talk to them. And this is done in quite a number of countries across the continent. Here in Nairobi, we have MEPAC. They just actually did a training last 2 weeks ago. So those are some of the places you can come and reach out and see. We have IPDET now. They even have two places where you can do training. We have one in Nairobi, or if you're able to pay, you can go to Ban. We were lucky we went to Ban and we got trained there. So there are so many other opportunities where I feel us as young and emerging evaluators, we can join in, joining VOPEs and youth networks. That is also very critical. And when we were at Evaluate, we actually published a toolkit, and I'll be uploading it here, on how VOPEs can actually engage young and emerging evaluators in VOPE leadership and governance. The tool, it's a small guide, very easy to follow on how to engage the years in this. And yeah, as I mentioned, AfrEA is really working because the project is already ticked. And I know once it will be launched, will be, to be a free flow. So you keep an eye and see on our socials. We'll be advertising, we'll be putting out the call because we really want 400. And we'll be training them on Made in Africa evaluation approach. The end game is to actually grow some entrepreneurs out of it. We train you, we give you some internship, we connect you to a mentor and a coach, and you work somewhere, and we come and ask you to ideate, and we'll have a whole team that will be evaluating the ideas. And if you have very brilliant ideas, we'll fund those ideas, and we want to see that take shape, and we'll be launching that on on our AfrEA in 2 weeks. I have a few questions here that have been posed, and Doc, I'll pose the question to you. We are seeing, now that I've been in the voluntary space for a while, we are seeing volunteer fatigue, especially with the young and emerging evaluators, because we are having this, you are competing. I was lucky to volunteer because I was being supported at home when I was starting. But that is not the case for the most of us. So how do we talk to organization to make sure that we are not tokenizing these efforts, and just address the fatigue, voluntary fatigue that we are seeing? Yeah.
Great question, Mark. And it's come up in a number of spaces recently about needing to build not only the supply side, but the demand side. And it's actually linked to one of the questions somebody put in the Q&A chat box also how, do we get the buy-in from leaders, to build the capacity of young and emerging evaluators? For me, that's a demand side issue because the value of evaluation is not seen as being either legitimate or as in other spaces where you have young people who are paid interns, for example, in spaces where, there are lawyers or chartered accountants and so forth. In none of those spaces do they expect young people to just volunteer for free to get the experience. And so recently we've been talking about the fact that it's possibly partly also demand side problem where we need to do the advocacy for institutions to understand how important it is to have highly skilled evaluators. And then in that way, when we have internship programs or young and emerging evaluator programs, nobody's expecting them to work for free. I think it's a very valid request and ask. I think it's not an unthinkable stage that young and emerging evaluators have reached. I, in fact, know a lot of young and emerging evaluators who are professionals. And for me, this is a very important point, and it links to what I spoke about the perceived deficit of Africans in the evaluation space. There are a lot of young professional Africans who come with different disciplinary backgrounds. They're economists, agronomists, environmentalists, environmental specialists, health specialists, and so forth. And so they are not empty receptacles for information to be building capacity on a ground zero. They're actually coming with fundamental skills in other disciplines that can translate or be transferred into the evaluation space. And I also believe that that is one of the problems where we perceive young and emerging evaluators as being, ground zero and just having no experience and expertise. Those young and emerging evaluators who've managed to grow by leaps and bounds. Mark, you are certainly one of those. You saw the opportunities, the spaces to go in to do the voluntary work, but also grabbed hold of those opportunities to produce excellence where it was recognized, and then people give you opportunities to further your career. And I've noted that with a number of people in this space. I think at the conclave last week, I was so inspired when I saw there was actually one panel that was recognizing leaders who were young and emerging evaluation leaders at some point, and I've graduated sort of in the higher echelons, and the lofty halls of evaluation. So for me, I think that it is recognizing that there is value of young people it's not a ground zero. But I do think my primary answer is that it's a demand side problem, and the advocacy is needed at the institutional level to say that you need to understand the value and the necessity of building local capacities. For Africa in particular, I'm really impressed by what AfrEA is doing about the Made in Africa evaluation space and growing that, and the intervention, the program that you're having now. I think it's an untapped area where expertise can be grown, and that can really be, and to build that market is going to be really important. And that might actually be one of those spaces of leverage where if AfrEA can build those capacities, and then people can be sent out and be paid then to do the kind of work in spaces where South-North learning is needed. In a lot of multilateral development institutions, they actually need, because there's this push now towards localization, the push towards contextual relevance of evaluations, indigenous evaluation, and in fact, decolonizing evaluation approaches. But there's a lack of knowledge of how to do it, of how to actually operate in this space. If AfrEA can build, the supply side of that, then that might also be one of those points of leverage to say, okay, let's build African capacities because there's already a natural what word can I use? Not proclivity, but there's the natural capacities already there. And to build the evaluation capacities and methodological expertise among local evaluators obviously will, produce the kind of supply that international organizations will need. So that might be another way as well to ensure that people don't volunteer their time. It is a very difficult question, I think, because the funding environment is constrained. And just one last point on this as well, it links as well to capacity development. With me being the head of IPTET right now, I do get a lot of requests to say we need support. You know, your training is inaccessible, it's expensive. I'm well aware of that. And one of the strategies that we are doing right now with the support of our partners, and the key one being the Global Evaluation Initiative, is having diverted all of our scholarships that would have ordinarily gone to Bern to the Nairobi program, because we realize we need to build local capacities, but people need support to attend those programs. For those of you who are here and don't know about the IPTET Nairobi program, please do go look at our IPTET website, because applications are still open. And there are 60 scholarships available for the Nairobi program in November this year. And I think that is the kind of commitment that institutions need to make. We need to put our money where our mouths are. Talk is cheap, but if we say we're supporting, local capacities, building local capacities, then we must put our money there as well. And that's my challenge to other institutions who might be represented here. Stop the cheap talk and put the money to where it's needed to be building the capacities and supporting those who don't have access ordinarily. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just to circle back on the point on IPDET scholarship, actually, I'm very proud to say after I came for the training, I got a promotion at work. So it's a prestigious program. It's our Ivy League for evaluation in the world. So I encourage our young and emerging evaluators to partake in that. I've seen so many benefits, and especially they have really tried, given that the funding ecosystem, how it's looking like, they have really, really, really tried. And they have actually brought it here. Nairobi is easier to move than the Europe side, so it's closer home. So please do apply. I would like to call Caleb. Do we have any questions that have been posed in French, please?
Well, for now, I think the questions have been, we've adequately responded to the questions. While you were intervening in English, I saw you answered most of the questions, and the interpreters would have done justice, giving them the right information in French. So I think you can go ahead and maybe find out if we have other people who have questions,
Yeah.
either
If
oral or written.
if you would want to pose a question, please, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. Anyone? If not, I can, again, Dr. Candice and I, we like to talk. So uh, I can talk a bit. Again, I just want to reflect and see some of the efforts and appreciate some of the efforts that we've seen being put across, the continent. Like we have an understanding with the Africa Development Bank. We had an understanding with USAID. We have an understanding with SIDA. Whenever they are conducting evaluations in the continent, they have a provision to have a young and emerging evaluator on board, and they'll be appreciated for their time. They may not get the pay for a consultant, but they'll get appreciation for their time, so that they learn by doing. And that has worked. We have the same with UNFPA. And I've seen, as I started mentioning, I've seen Jessica Bisgard also, who has done a lot of work with young and emerging evaluators. I know Ponge here, all his consultants, he has young and emerging evaluators. Yeah, so it's really a deliberate effort that we continue to see. And to my fellow young and emerging evaluators, people out here are so friendly. Sometimes we may feel shy, but people are so willing to help. Even when I was starting, I would just go in a space and say, I'm here to learn, to volunteer, and I would be given tasks. And as you continue engaging, you realize the ecosystem is very small, so you start seeing familiar faces. And when you're becoming more familiar, then it's easier for you to be tasked with higher responsibilities. And that's that has been my course actually. I volunteered for like a year. I wasn't paid anything, but then in the course of that voluntary, I got my first job with the UN. And they told me they actually gave me because they had seen me around. So it's a point. Yes. Could you please highlight some of the initiatives that? Thank you, Dr. Ponge. And also, you are part of the board member. Could I please ask you to be given the floor? Caleb, let's give Dr. Ponge the floor. I'm sorry, Doc, I'm turning the tables on you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much, Mark. I'm shocked I'm asking you a question and you're turning the table back to me again. But I just want to say that I'm so impressed with the work that you people are doing at both the AfrEA Young and Emerging Evaluators and also as part of the Global Eval Youth Network. You are doing some very good work in building the capacity of the young and emerging evaluators. As you rightly mentioned, I have personally been at the forefront in promoting young and emerging evaluators. And the history goes very far from as early as 2013, 2014, when we were working with Marco Segone, initially in Eval Gender Plus, and also in Eval Youth, when I was serving as a member of the board for IDEAS, the International Development Evaluation Association, in charge of Sub-Saharan Africa. I actually saw the need for involving the youth in evaluations that affect them directly. And for that matter, I even tried to lobby the board of IDEAS to come up with a youth membership. And it was as a result of this that we introduced the youth membership in IDEAS. And this has since transitioned into a full-fledged thematic interest group at IDEAS. And on the part of AfrEA, I'm also happy to note that I'm serving my second term, and in our first term, we worked as the executive and pushed to the board to have young and emerging evaluators brought to our board. And that is how we ended up having Mark as our young and emerging evaluator representing the Anglophone Africa, and we had Satunin as our young and emerging evaluator representing Francophone Africa. So it is at the heart of AfrEA to promote and mentor young and emerging evaluators. So I'll now like to turn it back to you, Mark, to show us some of the achievements that you are being brought to the board of AfrEA has had, and how this could be a lesson to other young and emerging evaluators. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ponge. Yes, I've led a couple of global and regional consultations. Actually, the consultation that also led AfrEA to walk the talk by having young and emerging evaluators on board. We've developed that proposal that I've already said. I've really helped the board in terms of the planning of events, webinars, and conferences. And we continue working, and I've even seen how now the board works. Essentially, when we are seeing out there, we didn't realize that it's such a huge task, but it is. But then there are graces to it. And in the other spaces, we've again add these agreements that I've mentioned, these understandings that I've mentioned with these multilateral organizations to have young and emerging evaluators across And this has actually worked. I've seen at least 30 people get consultancies and be brought on board. And sometimes I even, like I write to a VOPE in Mozambique, someone from UNFPA or UNDP, they want someone for evaluation. And then we're able to source a young and emerging evaluators there, and they go and they do the work. And the beauty of it is that all the recommendations that so far we've given, the the feedback has been very positive. So we've not been told that, oh, your young and emerging evaluators have slackened. No, we've seen actually all of them, they have continued and they grow those relationships and they forge their way. So I am not audible. Can you hear me?
I can hear you still, Mark, but maybe some of the participants can't.
Okay.
I saw the messages.
Oh, okay. I hope now you can hear me. Yes. So I was mentioning that at AfrEA we've had all these understandings with different organizations to have young and emerging evaluators on board, especially when they are conducting evaluations. And then the organization, I was actually part of the team that was leading the proposal writing. Again, these are efforts that our president, who was actually part of the Young and Emerging Evaluators Network and the leaders, they handed over to us. Then he joined the board. He's very deliberate. He's very keen to have us young ones be on the steering wheel. Yeah. So we will see that more, like, more often now, especially after the launch in Addis Ababa. A lot of we've been working behind the scenes, so now everything will be out here. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know if we have we're almost nearing time anyway, but I would want to see if we have anyone who would want to
There was
say.
a hand raised. There was a
Yes,
hand
please.
raised. The hand has just gone back down. I was about asking. And the webinar runs till, we still have about 30 minutes. So please, if you have questions, feel free to ask. We have enough time for discussions. And I saw a hand raised, I think, from Fingile or something like that. And I'm sorry I missed the name. I don't know if he's still interested in getting the floor. Otherwise, we are ready to pick up any questions, both oral and written. Okay, a hand is raised. Kosivi Mesemi.
Okay.
Vous avez la parole, Monsieur Kosivi.
Oui. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Je suis M. Mikosivi. Je suis très ravi de participer à ce webinaire et ça fait un plaisir. Je suis togolais et j'aimerais savoir comment je pourrais faire pour adhérer le réseau des jeunes évaluateurs au Togo. Merci.
Mawina, you can take this because I know you are the treasurer.
Oui.
Oui, je peux répondre. Monsieur Kossivi, bonjour. C'est assez simple en fait. D'habitude, c'est un des appels qui se lancent, mais le jeune évaluateur peut même se proposer. Donc, ce que je te conseille, c'est de s'approcher du réseau du membre du bureau. Moi, par exemple, peut-être, je ne sais pas comment on va faire. Je te laisse le numéro dans le chat. Le numéro de RT va dans le chat. Comme ça, tu me contactes après. Les formalités administratives seront faites très, très vite fait. Je ne sais pas si je reprends ta question. Monsieur Kossivi est là?
S'il vous plaît, oui, je suis là. Je disais à monsieur,
D'accord.
merci, je vous remercie.
Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Mawina. Ça me fera plaisir que vous pouvez, dans le contact, là, on va échanger en parallèle.
D'accord. L'indicateur Microsoft. Ça peut faire comme ça.
Stefan, my friend from Samia, I was waiting to see when you will ask the question. And I would suggest I would like to give you the floor. You are the leader.
Who is that, please?
Yes, Stefan Paulsen.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll read the question. How can VOPES in Africa strengthen collaboration and cooperation for capacity development for YEEs on the African continent, especially given the funding requirements where national interests and development are prioritized? Are there alternative ways of thinking about cooperation and shared interest while meeting national priorities and capacity constraints? I guess, Doc, you can take this one.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you, Stefan, for that question. I was actually thinking about you as I was going through this webinar, thinking about the WFP's YE program as well. And you being a graduate of that, I'm so glad that you asked the question. It's a really difficult question. Just before I answered it, there was another point I had my hand raised about to talk about the importance, and it will link to the response, Stefan, to your question. The importance of VOPEs in building a channel or a pathway for access and professional development for years. Just thinking about it and hearing different people speak, and even our esteemed panelists, how VOPEs actually become the point of departure, the launch pad, I can say, for people's careers. Certainly it was mine. That is how I got into the evaluation space, where I just entered, I was newly appointed in the evaluation space, and, also joined a VOPE at the same time. But it was more my VOPE involvement that catapulted me into the space and into the network than it was my actual job and position. So I wanted to just underscore the importance of VOPEs in this. And then related to what Stefan's asking is that VOPEs are seriously underfunded or not funded at all, considering this important role they play. So we need to ask the question, have we undermined, for example, the role of VOPEs in the evaluation ecosystem as partners to international development agencies or international development cooperation in general, but also in the national evaluation systems development? Some VOPEs have a stronger relationship with the national evaluation system and the country-owned evaluation system, such as in South Africa, for example. I think it's always, the South African M&D Association is always lauded to being, I think, one of the forerunners and an example of excellence in terms of VOPEs. And it's just grown in leaps and bounds, over subsequent years and decades. And I think a lot of work, it didn't just happen, there was a lot of work by board members to, I think, manage the relationship between, for example, the public sector and the VOPE, to say, hey, we have an important an important role to play in the evaluation ecosystem, and then to have collaborative initiatives in order to have something concrete to work on to demonstrate that value. To the extent now, for example, in the national policy environment, there are some guidelines that are used at a national level in the South African National Evaluation System, which I think is a brilliant development and progression of the role and the importance of VOPEs. And that's an example, I think, to all countries. But it's not enough. I don't think that there is a recognition of it. It's seen, I think, almost as being, part of civil society. And I think certainly, yes, VOPEs are registered as NGOs in most countries because the National Non-Profit Organization Act, that's normally how it's registered, for good reason, because of course that's the legitimacy that it gains, that it's an actual organization and institution. But I think we haven't maybe considered that how important it is as an act. It's not a nice to have. It's actually fundamentally important as a channel. And my question is then, how do we begin to advocate for VOPs as one of the pillars in building national evaluation systems? So it's not really an answer, it's more like questioning and observing that, yes, it is a problem. And maybe we haven't yet, when we talk about, for example, we talk about what are the components of national evaluation systems, we never talk about actually the VOPs as being an important pillar. We talk about all the other institutional architecture that supports national evaluation systems, that's ensconced in the bureaucracy of the public sector. But what about other actors? And I think it really is a blind spot at the moment, considering how important it is, because there's a feeder as well into the public sector from people who are in voluntary positions in VOPs, who eventually gain the kind of expertise that is in high demand and valued by national evaluation systems and get absorbed into that. So if that value is being undermined, we need to then expose that and say, hey, this is not, doesn't just happen. It's a fundamental pillar and component of building local capacities and national evaluation systems. I had a question actually for all of us in the room, for panelists, and if you allow me, moderator, through you, is to say that as I'm listening to people talk and even observing myself, what are the kind of characteristics that young and emerging evaluators need to have? We focus very, very much on the technical competencies, which we've admitted they're there. A lot of them are already there. But the leap that an individual needs to make from having those technical competencies and being part of a VOP, but making the leap into leadership and being recognized for the skills and competence and the leadership, and then being invited into spaces where you do have access to other opportunities. What are those characteristics? I mean, from my observation, I can kind of, they're the leadership characteristics that anybody who is, valued in a team space or an organization should have. But maybe we should unpack those a bit, because when I look across sort of the leadership of young and emerging evaluators who have sort of arrived, I shouldn't use that word, but who have really progressed very well, there's certain leadership characteristics that I can see are common across the board. But let's maybe unpack that a bit, because maybe somebody sitting here in the room is saying, but how do I become like one of these people I see? Like, what's that leap I need to make? And I think those are soft skills and not hard skills. Over to you, Mark.
Very tough question. And it's very tough now because it's like I can't turn the tables on you. Looking at this, and especially just speaking from the point where you've mentioned about the soft skills, as part of my voluntary service, I learned a few things. And one of the skills that I learned is just being very agile and nimble and having a political skill. Even you can tell from my talk, you know how I'm pitching it and how I'm talking about stuff. I learned that it's also a very critical skill to have, having that political skill, to know how to say what and how. Uh, I've also, but also on the flip side, I've also seen a few other leaders, especially like our president right now, Michel, who was actually recognized in Colombo 3 days ago as a transformational champion for, especially us young people, when we come and find those leaders who are just so willing, because also across the continent, I've also seen other leaders also who they see young and emerging evaluators as a sort of problematic, not having what it takes, and they see them as a competition of some sort. And in countries where we are having leaders with that sort of mindset, we are also seeing youths not being very active. And I remember when we were leading the campaign for Eval for Action with Marco and Sela and the UNFPA and Eval Youth and the Global Parliamentarian Forum. those are some of the things that we were trying to challenge, where we sort of now have to talk to challenge the status quo, to really show young people. And I've seen one of the Eval Youth co-chairs here has posted the same question, and that's the same challenge that we see. But also leaders are also waking up. They're also appreciating even out of the space for evaluation. For example, I live in Kenya, and I've realized our Gen Zs have been very a fundamental force of Recon and others. Now that I'm working with governments, I'm learning other countries are also keeping an eye of their youths, because they're, from what they have seen here in Kenya, because also youths are waking up and leaders are also waking up. So I think it's a moment of awakening. And I know I've not answered your question, but I would want to give the floor to anyone who would want to shed some reflections to it, or even chime differently.
Well, while
Stefan,
we're
yeah. Sorry, apologies.
I was saying that while we're looking into that, we have some other people who have raised their hands, and I see some questions in the chat. So maybe we can
Yes,
coordinate on
please.
how
Yes,
to
please.
get these ideas together, but also consider that we can take these people so that we can also get their questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I see a question from Tsabi Singh, and there's a hand raised. Jules, which one do you want me to go for?
We can take the raised hand.
Okay. So we are going to Jules, Raymond, Jaji.
Allô? Bonjour.
Bonjour, allez-y.
Bonjour, j'appelle depuis le Cameroun. Je suis très content d'être parmi vous et d'échanger avec vous au sujet de l'évaluation. Au sujet de l'évaluation. Déjà, je vais au niveau du thème pour comprendre les raisons de la célébration, quoi, pour voir un peu le CV, par le CV, pour voir un peu les résultats dont l'évaluation a eu à fournir au niveau de l'Afrique. Déjà, parce qu'on quand je vois le thème, c'est la célébration des 25 ans de l'évaluation en Afrique. Est-ce qu'au jour d'aujourd'hui, avec l'avancée de la technologie, on ne peut pas faire face, on ne fait pas déjà face à la nouvelle forme de technologie ou l'intelligence artificielle par rapport à l'évaluation? C'est un peu ça la face cachée de ce que je voulais savoir. Merci.
Mawina, would you, before I call on Doc or any other panel, Rubibi, any reflections? On the question for Jules?
Je peux toujours répéter si ça pose un problème si vous désirez. I can instead translate it in English if you need it. Because I was talking about this artificial intelligence who is coming now with a faster speed. Then from the way they were doing evaluation and the arrival of the artificial intelligence, how are we going to afford on it? How are we going to bypass it? Because now to make an evaluation, some people just look the reference card, the card de reference, to know that if something was aside, it means that they have not done it or sometimes we have done it. That's why I'm looking for how did the young evaluator will do in front of artificial intelligence. That's my question, please. Thank you.
Doc, I'll call you.
Thoughts, but whether it's a perfect answer or the right answer is another question mark, but I'll try. I was actually thinking, Jules, thank you very much, about AI as one of these skills that young and emerging evaluators need to think about developing, especially in becoming I think valuable or in high demand in the evaluation economy. Because of course, one doesn't want to skill in areas that are not being required. So I think that is definitely one of those areas. IPTET is offering this year a course on AI and evaluation at IPTET in Bern this year. But we are thinking of actually expanding that. It's just one workshop of 2.5 days. But we're seeing that there's a high interest in it, and I think we need to start making sure that it's part of curriculum for evaluation capacity development all around. It shouldn't just be a specialized workshop here and there. I was also thinking about the fact that there needs to be a link to this entrepreneurial mindset. Is there room and space for young and emerging evaluators to develop some of their own tools around this, or guidelines, or solutions around this, African-owned solutions around this? The space is wide open for this, I think. And instead of waiting for somebody else to fill the vacuum, to fill the space, I think that is part of the entrepreneurial mindset that I want to encourage young and emerging evaluators to start looking at, to say, we're not going to wait to be, trained by somebody else or waiting for somebody else to tell us what to do in this space. Because there are pockets of, spaces where this work is happening. And I think it's about finding out where is this happening. For example, I think in the International Evaluation Academy, which is also an institution that accepts friends into its space, for example, there are some spaces where you can start to learn and grow in that area. So I think it's about pushing into that area. I think it's not about waiting to say, who's going to give us the answer. We are going to be our own solution in this space. There was also a question, if I may take it, I don't want to kind of, just run into the space, but there was a question from Tabi Singh, if you'll allow me. Thanks, Mark. So I think it's about, and it's because I'm in the capacity development space that I want to answer this, and I've been involved in, the kind of academic space for a long time. I think that question is so important because there's no standard setting body for, what are the competencies, or what degree do you need, to become an evaluator. Certainly, if you've got international relations, political science, any kind of social science, it is a very good launch pad for you to transition into evaluation. But I also know people with different disciplines, that's, in fact, a very good evaluator actually has a chemistry science background. So it's not, at the moment, we don't have industry standards that says this is the kind of degree that you have. So social sciences is actually ideal, because I think social sciences does teach you the kind of critical thinking you need as an evaluator. As an evaluator, you need to have a lens with which you look at the world, to see what to make value judgments about data and information that you actually source in whichever methods you use. So I think it is a very good starting point. But I think some of the points that others have made also in the chat, for example, when Stefan was talking about the soft skills. And Stefan is actually, a graduate or one of those rising stars in the YE space as well, having been part of, young and emerging evaluator programs with World Food Program and the Clear AA Center, and then having demonstrated significant value, was then absorbed into the institution and institutions, and was in high demand, and didn't find it difficult to find a job at all. And I think it's because of these soft skills. So you've got the hard technical skills as a fundamental sort of floor and base from which to move from. But I think what he's talking about in the chat box is willingness to learn, being innovative. Communication is absolutely important, being confident, being concise, and driven and passionate, and having a vision and ambition for where you're wanting to go. That certainly, worked in my case. Like I said to you, more than 20 years ago, I was also a YE before we were called YEs. That's how, many of us didn't enter into the space with an evaluation background. But you grew in this space. Of course, the environment is a lot more sophisticated, if I can say now. So people do ask you about, you need experience and so forth. But I also know that in recruitment spaces, people are looking for really good people who can do the work. So even
Yeah.
if you don't have those 5 years experience and you don't necessarily have the master's degree, it has happened in institutions that I've been part of where that was overlooked to say, hey, this person's really great. They don't have the master's degree, but we really want to retain them. So I would say don't be dissuaded by that. Of course,
Yeah.
don't let grass grow under your feet. Do capacitate yourself, get the degrees, get the certificates and so forth, but work on those soft skills, the confidence, the ambition to be better, and those leadership skills as well. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to reflect on Nuren's comment, again, the definition, the reason is why we say YEE, the the Imagine evaluator is someone who has 5 years and below. So you can be in your 50s, you are a banker and you decided to do evaluations and change to evaluations, you are considered as Imagine. So you are still catered, you are not left out. And then on AI and evaluation, I posted, and I hope Caleb will post to all of us. There is a company called Rural Census. They actually use AI for impact measurement, and they train, and they have done a lot of work here in Africa. I know them because we've also used them and used their services. So, for example, you can go and do an interview. So, you record someone, you speak to them in their native language. So, they have really built their language model, and they continue to build. So, you go, for example, you speak in Swahili, you have the whole interview in Swahili, but then the AI will translate that to English and give you the analysis and everything. So Caleb, you can post the link, and they also do a bit of training, so you can reach out to them, and they'll be able to help. What other question? Any other question? Today the chat is very warm. Yeah. I don't know, Doc, whether you have any other sentiment, or Rubibi or Mawina, if we have, do you have
There is a
anything?
hand raised. I don't know if you
Okay.
can see the hands raised. There's a hand
I'm
raised.
not able to see someone.
We have Iron
Oh,
Hook.
Ian. Hi, Prof. Please
Yes.
join.
Thank you. No, I came slightly late. I was listening to Jane Davidson and Dugan and some other webinar, and I missed most of Candy's, which is always a great shame. My name is Ian Hopwood. I'm based in Senegal, and I'm somewhat emerged, but I'm still learning. And I'm just wondering if it wasn't said already, as Mark has got his wonderful background there of 25th anniversary of AfrEA, maybe it's already been said, but what will be the role of young and emerging evaluators? Can you say a little bit more about that for the AfrEA celebration? And for the follow-up to that, to what extent are the interests and the priorities of young and emerging evaluators really been reflected? I mean, I heard from Mark already that our current president himself, who was a young and emerging evaluator just 10 or 15 years ago, and I remember in ENAP, was very supportive. But are there any other institutional things which are being planned now? Anything more? Academies and I don't know what, to help us move ahead. We in Senegal, we have been running programs for the young and emerging evaluators for several years now, almost 10 years, with ups and downs. We rely a lot on voluntary support and so on. So I'm just wondering if you could give us a few perspectives which we could hang on to in preparing for Addis and for the follow-up, because the event in Addis is a big event, but what really counts is what sort of follow-up are you going to make? And I know that Candice was talking about some new initiatives within Africa. So if it's already been mentioned, that's okay. But and if
No
anybody
worries.
wants to write an article for the African Evaluation Journal, please do so, because we're always looking for good articles and thoughtful presentations by young and emerging evaluators themselves. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof, as always. Prof is a very good friend to why he is, and he has always championed. And every time we meet, he always challenges me with a new idea. So thank you so much, Prof. At the AfrEA,
Excuse me, Mr. Mark.
yeah. Oh yes, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to add something. Yes, as me, I should be a tool, and our country should help us to have infrastructures to support in exploring them in applications to be used, equipment like laptops and so on. But for years, we have to explore the AI, artificial intelligence, right? And grow with innovation, but not using it blindly. That was my point, my view. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rubibi. I see Dr. Ponge. Doc, I hope you are tackling the AfrEA, or I can talk a bit about the conference.
Okay, thanks so much, Mark. And thanks so much, Professor Ian Hopwood, for the good questions. I just want to mention two issues about the role of the young and emerging evaluators in the AfrEA at 25 celebration, and then maybe Mark, you can add on to something. The first one, I just want to mention that we have a complete session that will be dedicated specifically to the young and emerging evaluators, where we expect them to share on how they have been able to benefit from some of the initiatives that AfrEA has in the past few months initiated for the young and emerging evaluators. These include sponsoring them to attend conferences, to attend evaluation capacity building workshops, and to take part in various activities that are aimed at building their capacity in monitoring and evaluation profession. Then apart from that, the other role that they will play in Addis is that we are not saying that they are the leaders of tomorrow. We are saying that they are the leaders of today, and that today starts now. So for the bulk of the sessions, we will be putting one seasoned co-chair and a young and emerging evaluator as a co-chair for most of the breakout or the parallel sessions that we will have in Addis. So in this way, they start to learn early enough how they can even chair the sessions on their own. Maybe Mark, you can add to that. Thank you so much, Professor Ian.
Thank you, Doc. You took my thunder. I wanted to floss to Prof that why will be co-chairing the sessions. We'll have some strands where we'll have us discuss our and reflect about ourselves. And the other thing that I didn't, or rather you had missed, is that AfrEA will be launching a new program where we'll be training 400 young and emerging evaluators across the continent on Made in Africa evaluation approach, with an aim to giving an entrepreneur aspect of it. So we will train them, we will coach them, we will give them some internships where they'll actually also be paid. And then we will ask them to give ideas on some, on business ideas that can be funded. And whoever will come up with good ideas, we are going to fund them. That project will be launched already. We sort of have an okay from the funder in terms of the money, and the president will be launching that during the 25th anniversary. And then looking at the minute, at the hour, we only have like a minute, and I want to take this great opportunity to thank my friends, Mawina, Rubibi, Dr. Candice, as always, who is always available for us, young ones. I want to really thank you for making this very productive. We've also learned and heard from others, and we'll continue encouraging you to follow us, especially AfrEA socials and website. Please keep an eye, because after the launch, we are going to have many other things that will be launched. We even launched INSE. I wish we had time, we could talk a bit about that. And all these initiatives, the president is very critical to just ensure that YEs are very involved and are part of this. So thank you so much, and may God bless you all.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.